On behalf of the University of St. Thomas, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this First Friday Luncheon. We're so pleased that you're able to be with us here today to take part in this really enriching and engaging tradition that we've had for many years now. Of course, I want to start by thanking our platinum sponsor of the First Friday series, Minnesota Bank and Trust. We have many representatives here today, and thank you. I also would like to thank our gold sponsor, the Executive Education Programs of the Opus College of Business. And lastly, we want to be sure and thank our table hosts. We really appreciate the time and energy you put into inviting and hosting guests at your table for our First Friday luncheon. So thank you all. And in case you haven't heard or didn't see any of the digital signage on the way in here, Tommy Give Day is Tuesday, November 14th. And this is the day we ask all Tommies to participate in the university's third annual virtual fundraiser. The global display of Purple Power will raise much needed financial support for University of St. Thomas student scholarships. And every gift, no matter the size, counts. It will help a student. So you might have noticed, if you sat down, that there's a pair of purple socks at your table. And in anticipation of Tommy Give Day, they're quite snazzy socks. The person at your table that is wearing the most purple gets to take those socks home with them today. So... Napkins don't count. So if I could have your attention again, please. After our meal, we're going to have the opportunity to hear from Pat Ryan, President and CEO of Ryan Companies. Pat will speak to us about a developer's responsibility in growing communities. And at this time, I'd like to ask Father Snyder, our Vice President for Mission, to come forward and lead us in prayer.
Good afternoon, and let us join in prayer. Lord God, and giver of all good gifts, we are grateful as we pause before this meal for all the blessings that you give to us. Daily, we are fed with good things, nourished by friendship, and feasted with forgiveness. We are grateful for this university where we have been educated and formed to be responsible leaders who work to build up the common good. Bless the students who currently follow that path. May they grow in wisdom and knowledge and a deepening of virtue and faith. Mindful of your continuous care, we are grateful for the blessings of this table and this time together. Bless the hands that have prepared this food and those that serve it. Always keep in your special care those that we carry in our hearts and those who are most in need of your care and mercy this day. Amen. Bon appetit.
Good afternoon again. Please continue to enjoy your lunch. But we're going to move on with our program. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Pat Ryan is a 1975 alum of the University of St. Thomas. He received our prestigious university-wide Distinguished Alumni Award in 2016, and he currently chairs our Board of Trustees. So, frankly, he's my boss. So, I'm going to say all nice things. No. Pat was raised in Hibbing, Minnesota, where his uncle founded Ryan Companies in 1938. Pat and every one of his 5 siblings have at least 1 degree from the University of St. Thomas. And in the next generation, Pat's son and daughter-in-law and several of his nieces and nephews are Tommy's. Pat met his friend, soulmate, and soon-to-be wife after he finished college, Anne, who is a graduate of St. Catherine during his studies at St. Thomas, which was a very common phenomenon at that time. So the Ryans are a loyal and enthusiastic Tommy family, and many have joined us today. Thank you very much. Pat began his career at Ryan Companies in 1983 and has been president and chief executive officer since 2009. I'm sure he will tell you much more about what he does and about Ryan Companies during his talk. I personally have enjoyed getting to know Pat and Ann these past few years. I have learned that family, faith, education, and health, in particular children's health, are very important in both Pat and Ann's lives. Pat and Ann are blessed with the families of their 5 children and their spouses and are now expecting their 9th grandchild. As an active civic and community leader, Pat chairs the Education Committee of the Minnesota Business Partnership, is past president of the board at Benilde St. Margaret's High School, was involved with the founders of Cristo Rey High School. Pat also is past chair of Children's Hospitals and Clinics of Minnesota, past president of Children's Cancer Research Fund, and is chair of the Spring Point Project, which is seeking a cure for diabetes. Pat also is past president of Young Presidents Organization, YPO, and a current member of WPO, World Presidents Organization. In his free time, which as you can see, he has absolutely none of, or very little of, Pat is a sportsman and he enjoys hunting and boating. Please join me in welcoming Pat Ryan.
Thanks, Julie. So I'm one of 7. You mentioned 5 that graduated. We had 2 that kind of fell off the face of the earth and went to other schools. But we did count, and I think we've got 16 degrees. I mean, the expanded family. And hopefully that's called a good start. I'm looking forward to spending the next 30 minutes with you to tell you a little bit about Ryan Companies and really what we focus on as we not only build but develop here in the Twin Cities and elsewhere. But before I do that, I just want to make a comment about Julie Sullivan, the president of the university. I've had the privilege of working with her for most of her tenure here, probably the last 4 years. And in my experience, I think she's one of the best CEOs I've ever met. She is a marvelous listener. She is wicked smart. She is articulate. And what has been most ingratiating for me is that every decision that I see her make, she makes with the mission of the university at the forefront of the thought process. And you don't see that all the time. And so for those of you that haven't had an opportunity to get to know Julie, I would strongly recommend you do so. I think a lot of those attributes are because I've been mentoring her, but I'm not sure. But I do have a bone to pick with you. I noticed when I saw the lineup for the First Friday series that you put me right between a governor and an archbishop. And I'd like to thank you for that. And then I'm a construction guy. And as I was reflecting on it, I realized that I wasn't qualified for either. I had way too much fun in the early 70s here at the university to ever run for elected office. And as a proud father of 5 children, I never bought into the celibacy deal, and so the archbishop was off the table also. So what I'd like to do is spend a couple of minutes grounding you on who Ryan is, the what we do, the how we do it, and then spend most of the time talking about the why, because I think that will bring everything into perspective relative to our community efforts. I'm supposed to have, okay, my assistant was really concerned. There we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history, but very briefly. So as Julie said, we're celebrating our 80th anniversary on January 3rd of 2018. And it's a very prideful time for our company because there's not a lot of family-owned businesses that survive that long, privately held businesses, and that have survived so well through the transitions. The second, it was started by my grandfather, and shortly thereafter, my two uncles joined my grandfather. My dad never did join. After he got out of graduate school, he pursued a successful career in insurance and estate planning. And so I tell people that I really snuck into the family business through the back door when nobody was looking, because we didn't grow up in that environment. The third generation consisted of my cousin Jim and myself, and we were partners for 26 years and just had a marvelous relationship. Unfortunately, he passed away about 9 years ago, and so I've been at the helm ever since. So that's our history. So who are we today? As I said, we're a builder, we're a developer. We've got about 1,300 fabulous employees. They're the ones that make things work each and every day. We're in 13 offices in 10 states. And we have what I would like to call a collective wisdom in our company, because we're not just a builder, we're not just a developer, we're not just an architect, we're not just a property owner and manager, but we have all of those disciplines in-house. And so whenever we engage with a client, if we can bring those disciplines to the table, we think we can help that decision process immensely. And in fact, that's one of the things that has really differentiated ourselves from a lot of our competitors, because we can wear so many of those different hats. So that's very briefly the what and the how. But let's go to the why, because I think that's really gets to the heart of the culture of a company, to what you do and how you do it. We don't look at the bricks and sticks of real estate. What we try to do is put people behind what we do. And so we create places for people to thrive. Our goal, my goal, is to ensure that we can get all 1,300 of our employees thinking about the people that are going to use and access the buildings that we build. So if we're building a senior housing facility, if I can get the laborers on the job sites, the architects, the project managers, the developers, to invest in that project as if their mom and dad were going to be moving there, their care factor goes up significantly, and we perform a much better job. The same thing that applies to healthcare if we're building one of those. If you think about it and say, you know, is this where I want my son or daughter or my grandchild to be treated? You're going to care a lot more. In the retail world, if I can create an environment to help the retail world shop more, which is quite a low bar as it relates to my wife, but we won't go there. But so we're creating these environments for people to thrive. What about all of us that are parents and our children are launching themselves into their new career? When we're creating a white-collar environment, an office environment, if we want them to be motivated to do the best job that they can, we are succeeding because they are succeeding, and it's not because the building is succeeding. And this has been a journey we've been on for quite some time, and I think it is taking hold. Once we focus on that, we then tend to look outside of the building. What impact are we going to have on the community. What are we going to add to the community? You know, development sometimes gets a tough rap, but if you look at it and what you're bringing to the table and not taking away from it, your perspective changes. Are we going to leave it in a better place than we found it? Are we going to be able to create something that is a wow? Are we going to be able to spawn other businesses and other projects? And are we going to be able to work in a compatible manner with the city fathers and mothers? What are the neighbors, how are they going to react? How are we going to interface with them? So there's many, many of these issues that you end up dealing with as you look at the community. And when you do higher profile project, you cannot afford to ignore that community. However, in that process, almost 100% of the time, there's tension. Because what we are doing is we are a change agent to a neighborhood. And in that, we are trying to push something forward to the future, and the neighbors are oftentimes trying to retrench and preserve the status quo. Not because of anything negative, but that is their home, that is a constant in a world in which is changing so rapidly that that is the one place that they can depend on. So it's incumbent on companies like ours to engage the neighbors early, honestly, and openly. And it is also incumbent on the neighbors to do the same. And if we can work together, which the vast majority of the projects you do and you succeed, they move forward and the community is better. Not all the time are you successful, and that is because we either haven't had the right dialogue or we haven't had the integrity in the process. So let's talk for a moment on what is causing these neighborhoods to be far more aggressive than they used to be, far better managed, assembled, and capitalized, and the why that happens. And it's all about change in our world. Last month, I think it was last month, Governor Plenty spoke about the dynamic change that's going on in the world. And you have to read a couple of books. I'm going to recommend them. But the day of the slowest change of the rest of your life is today. And it is changing at a pace that you cannot imagine. And it is being driven by the electronic world and by technology, but it's having a disruptive impact on every aspect of our lives. And that becomes troubling for us as human beings. It becomes challenging for us as human beings. And we look to protect the status quo, and we can't any longer. It is changing that fast. You can cite example upon example upon example. One quick one. Uber, most of you have taken it. It's disrupted the taxi industry that you've all read. It is damaging the rental car business. In New York City, you used to have you have to have a medallion in order to run a cab. 4 years ago, it had a value of $1 million. There was just a trade of a medallion about 3 weeks ago. It was for $120,000. That's what Uber and its comparable companies have done to that one industry. And you can go on and on about the electric cars and things, and I'm not going to bore you with all of that. But what it's causing companies to do is they have to continually change to stay up with that change. And you have to retread your employees so that they are educated and can perform the functions that they can. And so we see generations that are looking at parents getting laid off, or they are getting laid off, not because they're bad people, but you need talent sets today that much of the workforce doesn't have. And interestingly enough, automation is creating more jobs than it is causing to be lost, but you need a certain education level to do that, and that's where the void is, and that's really the challenge to places like St. Thomas and other places to make sure that we are training and educating our students to be contributing employees that are flexible employees, because that change is going to continue on. So the two books that I mentioned, I think they're fascinating books. One is by Thomas Friedman, local boy, writes for the New York Times. "Thank You for Being Late" is the title. It's fascinating in the sense that he talks about this change, but then the societal issues that it is causing, and then the geopolitical issues that it is causing. And I would encourage you all to read it, because I think it starts to put into perspective what we're dealing with. Why do we just come off a presidential election where on the left you had a absolutely avowed socialist, and on the right I'm not sure what we had, but he's the president of the United States. But I mean, conservative. And you have this huge division. And you can go on, but you take a look at Brexit. Why did England decide to divorce itself from the European Union? You take a look at the elections in Germany, and you can go on and on. I mean, it's a fascinating book. The second one is No Ordinary Disruption, written by two partners at McKinsey. It's more of a business book, but then again, it talks about the four fundamental shifts. And one of the ones that was an aha moment for me is that the aging population of developed nations and what that has caused, the issues that that is raising in societies coupled with the technological change. I digress a bit. I do that often, but I bring that up because I think that starts to speak about the organized neighborhoods in which we are trying to get things accomplished. And so we cannot be disrespectful of them. We cannot ignore them, but we've got to embrace them. And when we do, we end up with better projects. So I'm going to switch here. Look at this. And I'm going to focus on three projects that they're larger profile projects that we've developed and built in the Twin Cities here, and talk about the community impact that they've had, both intentionally and accidentally, because they've been significant in their own right. Midtown Exchange, it's on Lake in Chicago, the old Sears warehouse. It's interesting if you want to talk about Amazon today. Sears in the 20s figured out the last mile. They plumped these they did 12 of these throughout the United States, and these are built like fortresses. The floors are like 4 foot thick, because they would store all of the goods that people would either come and pick up or that would be delivered to them. And then they had to store those catalogs. Most of you are too young, but they'd send out catalogs like this. Up on the range, we used to cut them apart and use them as shin pads when we were playing hockey. After Mom had read it. But this lake in Chicago, where the Sears warehouse had been sitting empty for about 20 years. And it was in one of the toughest neighborhoods of Minneapolis at the time. The #1 drug trafficking corner in the city of Minneapolis was Lake in Chicago. And we competed for an RFP. I can remember the night I got a call from Rick Collins, and he said, "We won the RFP," and I looked at my cousin Jim, and I said, "Now what do we do?" And that's exactly how I felt. Well, in many respects, we got hit by the lucky bus, because Alina was looking to consolidate its headquarters, and they would take about half of that building, about 500,000 square feet. We proposed to them, and I give all of the credit to Midtown Exchange, to Dick Pettengill, the CEO of Alina, because he was the one that said, you know, we are in the healthcare business, and our delivery of healthcare doesn't stop at the exit of the hospital. It's a community health, and the way that we're going to help this community is by moving our headquarters there and populating it with people who want to live close by, work, and shop. And in fact, that is what's happened. The last half of that building, and the second half, is workforce housing in condominiums. And then a very interesting concept is on the first floor is our global marketplace, which is a not-for-profit. And what they do is they incubate new businesses that are starting, new retail businesses that are starting by primarily, not exclusively, but primarily immigrant people of that neighborhood. And they're populating that space, and they're actually starting a business and creating a living, and they will either stay there or they will branch off. It's been considered one of the top 2 marketplaces of its kind in the country, and if you haven't been there, I'd recommend you go there, because you're hearing every language spoken, you're smelling every aroma that you could imagine, and there's just a beehive of activity. That project in and of itself was a success, but what it did is it opened our eyes during that 5-year development to what was going on in the neighborhoods. And I don't know about you, but for the majority of our life, we've lived in the suburbs. And our great interstate and highway system has created an opportunity for people like me and you to get in my car after work, go 55 miles an hour through the inner city on a highway. Now they've put barriers up so that we don't even have to look at the inner city, to our nice, comfortable home in the suburbs. And when you get there, you understand what the problems are, and one of the big problems is the poor education opportunities that these young kids have. Our Minneapolis School District graduates maybe 50% of its students, and of those 50% go off to college. So that's 25% of the high school population in the inner city goes off to college. The Jesuits decided they wanted to start a nonprofit. We helped immensely. I'm sure many of you in this room did. And they're, I think, in their 11th year. 100% of their graduates are accepted into a 4-year or 2-year college, and 96% of them go. Those that don't usually enlist in the service. And it's a raving success, and it is now being used as a model. And interesting, and then after that, what happened? And we built this about 3 blocks away from the Midtown Exchange. Then Children's Hospitals started to see what was happening in the neighborhood. They raised money and they invested $350 million into the upgrade of their hospitals. It's one of the leading hospitals in the country, pediatric hospitals in the country. And so now this neighborhood is being gentrified. And home values are increasing. People are taking care. You can see it, just the freshness. And that's the unexpected, that's the hoped for but unexpected consequence of what you do. This is a heat map. This is, if you're ever curious, this records crime in the city. And if you see that star in the lower middle, that's Midtown Exchange. That was the #1 crime peddling corner in the Twin Cities. And you can see how clean that has become because of the activity. Now, I'd like to say that we've gotten rid of all the clouds, but you displace them. And one of our responsibilities is displacing that crime enough so that it evaporates and goes away. So in many respects, we work in concert. Second one is St. Paul Saints Stadium. Fascinating project. Hopefully many of you have been there. It's in Lower Town in St. Paul. We were hired to be the designer, the developer, the builder. And it's a public-private partnership with the city of St. Paul and the St. Paul Saints. Before they engaged us, they had interviewed the people leaving the game for I don't know how long a period. 70% of the people that were leaving the game didn't know who won. 50% of the people that were leaving the game didn't know who the opposing team was. I say that because what they determined is they had to create an entertainment venue that, oh, by the way, hosted baseball, a minor league team, as opposed to a baseball venue that was fun. And what they've done is spectacular. I love taking my grandkids there. It's part of the fabric of the city. Weddings are had in center field, and they've got the goofiest stuff that's going on throughout, and it's about 20% of the price of a Twins game. I hope there's no poll ads here, but it's the truth. And there again, look at this heat map. You can see the star, and that heat map of crime that is tucked up in the corner there is on the other side of the interstate. That was really right down in Lower Town. And so with the successful project, what you've done is we've been able to displace it and move it. But there's apartments, there's restaurants, there are condos, there are event centers that are going on. They've got the Jazz Festival there now that is one of the largest jazz festivals, I understand, in the country. So those are the unexpected consequences. Lastly, how am I doing on time? Do I have a timekeeper? Okay. Well, when you get up to leave, I'll know I'm done. Downtown East, which you've probably, hopefully you've been to, but if not, you've read about. This was a area right around the new Viking Stadium, the US Bank Stadium, and we were fortunate enough to acquire 5 city blocks, which in our business, you never have that opportunity. And if you do, you can never afford it. But that area, you can take a look at, we've marked it in red. It was a sea of asphalt. And there is no reason that you would ever go there. And when that became available, we were working with some of the people at the Star and Tribune, and we were just doing visioning. And my son, who's an architect, said, "Dad, you got to create a reason for him to go. And it's not going to be a building. Nobody's going to go to a building sitting in a sea of asphalt. You've got to create a park to create life for the community and for the businesses, and then ring it with density." And I looked at my son, and I said, "Well, I'm not going to pay the price that Star and Tribune wants for a park." And I was proven wrong based on the economic modeling that we did. So the catalyst to that was the Commons. And the whole driver of that was because the Viking Stadium had gotten banged about all this public money. And I'm sure we could have an active conversation of whether or not it was a wise decision or not. But the fact of the matter, that decision had been made and an infrastructure had to be put in place. We had the opportunity to create the front yard to that stadium, but also became the front yard of what is now 1.2 million square foot second headquarters for Wells Fargo, for 200 apartment units, for a Radisson Red Hotel, the Millwright office building. And it's all come together in a marvelous way. So this Common is just it's not a dormant park. It's an active park, highly programmed park. So if you want to see the Minnesota Orchestra in the summer, there's outdoor concerts. If you want to go skating in the winter, there's going to be skating rinks. And it's going to be it is very active. One of the gauges of a successful community-based project is what other developments has it spawned. And this is an area that for 20 years, there was virtually no development. And within about 2 years of launching this, there was another 12 projects that were announced. I can't take credit for any of it because it wouldn't have happened without Wells Fargo. But the fact that we worked with the state of Minnesota, the Minnesota Sports Facility Authority of the city, to create a public asset that people wanted to go to, it was able to move this project forward. And I was reminded during this process, when you want to throw the towel in, that great cities have great parks. And if you just close your eyes and travel around the world where you've been, it resonates every time. And so this was our opportunity to make that contribution to the city, and it's worked marvelously well. I'm looking at a guy here, he's half asleep, but Russ Nelson is a principal with NTH, Nelson Thyssen Hoy. And coincidentally, I didn't know until this morning that Russ was going to be here. Russ's company and ourselves worked together on each one of these projects, and that's a company that has very much of the same philosophy. But it doesn't stop there, because those are the projects that add to the community. But what you can be most proud of when you have an opportunity to run a company is, what are your people doing to make the community better? And as I said, we've got 1,300 of, I think, the finest people in the business. We ask each one of our people on their personal strategic plan that they sign up for annually to make a commitment to contribute to the community, not just financially, but with their time and their talent also. Because communities need leaders, and we think we've got marvelous leaders. We also match their contributions, and we incent them to take leadership roles, and so that match will increase based on the leadership role that they take in those community organizations. It's not altruism entirely. There is some capitalism at play, because our philosophy is that if you invest in your community, the community will be healthier and it will be better, and therefore it will grow and need what we offer more frequently. And so that's really a philosophy that we have tried to embed in all of our people throughout the country. And for the most part, it works quite well. Just a couple of more quick comments. And one of them is what role does faith have in all of this? And it's an interesting question that it probably takes a lot longer to answer than I'm capable of. But I think it's significant. I grew up in a household that had a very strong faith belief, and with a philosophy that if you work hard and do good, you will do good. I then had the privilege of going to a Catholic university, which is very serious about educating the whole person, not just the intellect. And I think that has a lot to play in it. Then I've had the privilege of over 40 years, or for about 40 years, to work for a company that really, its underpinning is do good unto others. And when you put all that together, the community outreach that we do helps our business immensely. I think we help the communities significantly. And it is stated in Luke 12:48, for everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required. And how true that is. Final comment about UST and about community, because I think it's a perfect ending. The leadership that this university has in education, hopefully you have all heard of the Doherty Family College. This is the second university in the country that has embarked on this journey, whereby we have instituted a 2-year program targeted at inner city immigrant children who are not in a place to be able to go to a 4-year university, either financially, academically, and or socially. And so this program that was created really allows the university to wrap their arms around these young men and women and provide bus passes so they can get to school. Tuition, by the way, is $1,000 a year. The balance is made up with grants and through philanthropic endeavors. But there are social workers to help these kids because they are in a population that is nothing like the population from where they have come. They have tutors, and they are engaging the students from the 4-year university to tutor these children. And St. Thomas is quickly becoming, this is only the first year. Here's what's amazing. The university couldn't accept applicants, I think, until July 3rd, Richard. And by the middle of August, there's 107 of these people on board. That's a month and a half. We can take 150 of these students in each grade per year. And what we are doing in a city that has one of the highest achievement gaps in the country, which is embarrassing, Julie and her staff in this university have decided to take a risk and to do something about it. And I take my hat off to you for doing such a marvelous job. Thank you very much. So that's it. Did I run over? Is there time for questions or? One or two? If they're hard questions, I'll have my wife answer them. If not, no questions. Joe, we're getting out early. Thank you all for, I thought I snuck by.
What are your thoughts on the new building on Lake Street, the old, Swedish something or other, Swedish Institute, is that what you guys bought? Or arguing with I'm sorry.
You mean the Sons of Norway building?
Yeah.
Sons of Norway? So we're working with a partner, and that's going to be retail on the main level, and then we're going to be doing apartments above, and we're just going through the community process right now. So much of what I talked about in that community tension exists because of traffic, and so what are we going to be doing to mitigate that traffic and really be additive as opposed to subtracting from it? You know, one of the hot things right now, and this has nothing to do with your question, but we are being challenged to build net zero energy buildings. And that is a big challenge, but it's one that our industry, I think, will be standing up to, where we are consuming zero energy throughout the course of the day and night, 365 days a year. We're probably about 17% of the way, but that's a lot better than 50%, which is where our industry is currently. There was another one?
I have a question. Any comments about the Ford plant, planning out there? I noticed
Yeah, and this is still early in the game. We've been watching it from kind of afar. That is probably going to be one of the most attractive, developable inner city parcels of ground in the country. And so what it could be is nothing short of spectacular. There's a lot of hurdles to overcome. You have people that would like to, this is unbelievable to me, they wish the Ford plant was still there. And if you today, if that was vacant ground and Ford came in, proposed to build a plant, they'd be run out on a rail so fast, make your head. I mean, so that's the interesting dynamic. I think it's going to be a live, work, play environment. I think it's going to change a lot before it gets done. Ford probably has 6 months to a year left on the environmental remediation, and then the interesting stories will unfold. You know, traffic can be directed to the west across the Ford Bridge, very close to the light rail. You can do it to the south and get on the interstate. You can go to the north. If you go to the north, you're primarily going through residential area. So that's where the tension is it's gonna come down to traffic. Okay, I'm being cut off from behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, for your illuminating comments about how we build and sustain thriving communities, and for yours and Ann's personal support, and also words of support for the Doherty Family College. If there's any of our alumni in the room who haven't met him, the new dean of the Doherty Family College, raise your hand. Alvin Abraham is here, and I'm sure he'd be delighted to chat with you afterwards, so please feel free to approach him. We look forward to our next First Friday luncheon. Our next First Friday luncheon will be February 2nd. Our speaker will be Mike McAvoy, a 2002 graduate from the University of St. Thomas. He currently is president and CEO of The Onion, so this promises to be a lively and entertaining presentation. In the meantime, I hope you'll all join us for one of our signature events of the year. Really, one of the highlights of the year is our alumni Christmas luncheon. Archbishop Hebda will be our featured speaker. We also will be joined, as we always are, by our St. Thomas choral group, and they will bless us with songs of the season. So if you haven't signed up, please go to the website or talk to your table host and get on the list now. That is always a packed event. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you again for being with us.